Hey everybody, this is Perch. Kind of a casual conversation. I just want to go over. It's Thursday morning, and there are a bunch of new comics. I say this because I don't know when this will get posted. Hopefully sooner, because there's probably some time sensitivity to this. But I want to just give some thoughts on some comics that I started reading yesterday. So got my comics on Wednesday, which is oftentimes not how it works. I normally pick up some of the DC stuff on Tuesday and then get some more comics on Wednesday. And I'm reading through, and I think one way that I think I read comics, and I don't know it's better or worse or any of the rest, but it's how I do it, is I kind of put my mind in the place of the book I'm reading. So if I'm reading a copy of say New Mutants by Vita Ayala versus I'm reading Action Comics by Philip Kennedy Johnson, I know those two books are different. They're going to be handled differently. The plot, the tone is going to be different. So I set my expectations accordingly. And then what I'm really I think I don't rate one book against the other. Like I'm not saying, do I like Action Comics more, New Mutants more? I'm really rating the book against itself. Like how does this copy of Action Comics stand up to the previous issue, and how's this storyline going and everything else? There's nothing wrong, by the way, with putting books against each other. I mean, that's how people make buying decisions. It's fine. But I find it's just if you read a lot of comics, I think you almost naturally start thinking and reading and kind of shaping it that way rather than kind of which comic is the best of the week. I don't know. That's me anyway. Just that's how I view it. So I went through and I read a number of comics, and I kind of a couple takeaways, and it's put me in a bit of a thoughtful mood. Um, the analysis I've been doing with comics from the past to comics to today. By the way, that analysis is not done in order to say look how great comics were versus how they are now. And I need to figure out some good matchups that are a little different. Like one of the ones I was thinking is taking the Spider-Man #1 that Dan Slott did, that sold a gazillion copies, and then comparing that against that one against the recent Zeb Wells, John Romita Jr. Like how is a comic evolving from say 2015, 2016 to 2022? That's potentially interesting. How do we want to compare, say, how West Coast Avengers #1 was structured versus how Avengers #1 from the past was structured? That's the kind of stuff that I think it opens up. Like what I'm trying to do is really show how have the comics evolved or changed over time, and what are the storytelling techniques and other things they're using. But anyway, so some thoughts of this week's comics, just a couple of the ones I read, because I went through a handful of both the DC and Marvel books. I often, by the way, hit the DC and Marvel books first and do the indies second. And I realized I do that because the indies tend to take more time. There's more density to the reading often, is the case. So Action Comics, I read that issue. So this is the start of the Revolution saga on War Worlds. This has been one very big saga. I'm a big fan of this. I don't. It's not an event. This storyline, this arc that Philip Kennedy Johnson's doing. I think it's showing Superman in a new light. It's giving Superman an excuse to do very different kind of barbarian like things, forcing him to deal with slightly changed, well not slightly, massively changed power set than what he's used to. And it's doing some good mythology building around Mongol, which has often been a pretty one-note villain, and this is providing some real complexity to him. I think Philip Kennedy Johnson's is doing a very good job of making it feel like an epic. It feels like something really big, really substantial, with two big exceptions, and we'll get to those in a moment. But in general, I think this story is very solid. I like the interplay between them. I like the Superman's interacting with like Midnighter and Natasha and kind of some different characters and how that's all playing out. I like the Manchester Black aspect. I like some of the villains and creatures. Feels like Johnson's creating almost his version of kind of the Black Order of kind of people who are part of the Mongol overall kind of mythology. And if you're Warner, and you're thinking about what to do with Superman, this wouldn't be a new movie. Like if they're going to reboot Superman and start over with a brand new series, I certainly wouldn't start with this arc. It'd be a terrible place to begin. But when you get to the third movie or so, this is exactly the storyline you want to do. It would be visually very dynamic. This is where if you ever did a Superman TV show with a little bit of a higher budget, on HBO Max, this would be a good arc to copy. It's pulling some new things on the mix. But really good. So two big negatives though. Number one, and this is, well, there is actually no excuse. I'm going to say, well, but there's reasons for this. I'm sure there are, but they're painful, and it's done when this happens. So number one, the art changes, kind of mid story, in this latest issue. The artist literally changes, and I understand that this can sometimes happen because the artist gets sick and everything else, or there's a tragedy, and there's a lot of really good reasons why that happens. But I'm speaking as a reader, and I know this would be very disastrous in many cases to sales, but I would prefer the comic delays and stops and doesn't ship, particularly when the artist is so connected to the story. And in this case, the artist that's been working with Johnson on this book, it's I believe it's his Last God collaborator, and it looks just very unique. It's sold this entire storyline. I mean, credit goes to Johnson, but credit goes to the artist as well, and the colorist and the creative team, because it's made a very, very unique world. And so switching out the artist, and I don't know why it happened. Was somebody late? Who knows? But delay the comic by 2 months if you have to, but keep the artist the same. I think that nothing erodes the feeling of a connected, epic kind of story more than you get in there and you shift the artist. It drives me nuts every time, and it's just with a story like this one where the art is so distinctive, it's very jarring. The second negative is that DC continues to undermarket this book. And this isn't a case of like, it's a really great comic. They should promote it more. I mean, yes, that's true, but what's going on right now? I mean, here's where I get very confused, because you gave Johnson the time and energy and credit and dollars to craft a very long storyline. This is we're going on a year, I think, right? This story has been going. Let's see, I think we're going on a year, and why in the world, if you're willing to commit to that amount of time, this long of an arc, this many issues, the art team, the creative team, everything else, if you're committing to all that, why are you letting it fly under the radar in the company? You're committing to a big story that is made to one day adapt to your parent company and do a movie on. Why in the world are you not promoting it more? DC is absolutely leaving huge amounts of dollars on the table. And I'll put it this way: DC has spent more time promoting their round robin tournament, of which I believe we've had two during the course of the storyline, than a comic that is in the bank being sold. One of their core characters, their arguable number 2 or number 3, but it's their number 2. So generally, when I've talked with I've talked with people at Warner in the past, the way they view their licenses is number 1 is Batman, number 2 is Superman, number 3 is Wonder Woman. Now, maybe Wonder Woman and Superman have swapped places from time to time. I don't know. But at any rate, you're talking about a billion-dollar IP. And you're talking about a comic that is doing something very dramatic and very different with a character that, in a funny way, could probably be made cheaper than a lot of the Superman's regular adventures, because they've lowered down the power set. Yes, it's a alien setting and everything else. But I'm just saying, this to me is crazy, and it is actually having an effect on the title itself. The story is still good, but it really does not feel like DC is behind it. And as a result, it just sits out there. And this is common now. We've seen it with several titles where the company is not promoting really good things they're doing. And it's forgivable to some extent if it's a 1-issue, 3-issue kind of series, but we've been at this for a year now. They should have gotten their act together and gotten it done. Its sales are okay; they're not great, and this is just baffling that you're letting good work go across. And it does, unfortunately, it lends a lot of credence to when people say things like DC is only interested in brownie points for the various social actions, when you're doing big promotions for Pride variant covers more than a year-long storyline yeah, you do start to ask those questions. Yes, you start to wonder what are people actually after, because it doesn't seem to be money or putting over this product. And anyway, so that's, and it's not to compare this title to those activities, but you could go down the line of the whole thing, and it's very, very weird to me why this is happening the way it's happening. Anyway, another title I picked up and checked out was the Avengers. So read the Avengers. I admit, in this case now, Jason Aaron's been on the title for a while. This issue was really all focused around Jane Foster, and she's having kind of a fever, not dream, but just kind of this temptation of Mephisto. And what struck me about this book is that it really was something that once upon a time would have been done on, say, 2 to 3 pages total. I think about when the X-Men, and on a regular basis they were doing this with Madeline Pryor back in the Australia arc, would be tempted by demons, or they would have these sequences where something kind of horrific would happen, and something would occur basically. And this is an entire comic of those 2 to 3 pages. And the one thing that absolutely needs to be done. Some editor needs to go over to the writers over at Marvel and go, all right, stop, full stop with multiverse storylines. You guys have drug it from something novel and special that every once in a while would be a surprising pop, to every issue is some wacky alt version of the character. And I get that they're wanting to do some things with Jane Foster Thor, because you got the new Thor 4 Love and Thunder movie coming out, and it's going to have Jane Foster Thor. And I get all that, but this is absurd. It's taken all of the energy away from this stuff. And wherever the Avengers is going right now, I don't care. It's you don't the story is told just in a very drawn out, frankly, very, very dull way. And Jason Aaron's a good writer. I do maintain that. I know that some people really hate his Thor run and everything else, but much of his indie work, he's done good comics. I just don't get how the Avengers feels like it's absolutely trying to kill time. That's where the book's at. And knowing that Jason Aaron's been leading up to this Mephisto is the multiverse of evil, or what, all this kind of storyline. But the next big moment for the title is Avengers versus X-Men versus Eternals. So when you think about it this way, the way you have to think about this is this very decompressed, very slow, very, who knows where this comic is headed, is got an interruption coming up, which is this storyline that's going to go from pretty much now to, somewhere in, I think, September, October, November, somewhere this AVXVE storyline. I think it wraps up in late September, October. So then we're going to get back to the Mephisto stuff that Aaron's doing, and it just like the book has absolutely lost the plot, and it is the only thing I can think of is Aaron is trying to lead to a giant summer event where Mephisto and the legions of demons come and try and do the shenanigans against the Avengers, and this is summer of 2023, 2024. Like, how long are we in for this? It's I don't know. It's like watching passion die reading this book. And the art is fine. It's there. It's certainly, it's not offensive. It's well rendered. So I no knock against the artist. But you get an entire issue with this kind of, the basic premise is that Jane Foster is having a kind of a fever dream, and she's got some, the Mephisto's trying to toy with her and tempt her and all this other stuff to a happy, blissful life, but then she fights back against it, and there's an alternate multiverse version of Jane Foster Thor that shows up and kind of helps a little bit, and then she's sitting back at the Avengers table, and she's an Avenger now, but like there was no real celebration of that fact. We're just getting an entire issue dedicated to this. And then she stares, weirdly over at Thor's hammer, going, "I'm tempted by the hammer still." And it's like you're left with, okay, so is this setting up a big storyline where she turns evil and tries to steal Thor's hammer, or is it just saying she liked that experience once upon a time and she misses it a little bit, or what are the Avengers doing? These comics have way too much of them just sitting around a table doing jack all. And I think in the recent issues of the Eternals are invading Avengers Mountain. Avengers get to defend their sanctuary, and there's a bit of a fight and some other things going on. And it's bizarre that I feel like I've seen way more action from the Avengers in pages in the Eternals and the actual Avengers title, which is we get it. Mephisto wants to corrupt the Avengers, and he's trying. And there you go. Enough. Seriously, enough. So anyway, that's the other book, and then I'll put a pause on this. But maybe I'll do this more often. Just kind of here's what I'm reading. Here's what my thoughts are on it. The Punisher. So this is another Jason Aaron book, and this is the third issue. And I noticed for the first time that they're setting up kind of what looks like some chapter type stuff in this, which indicates that like there's going to be 3 or 4 arcs within the 12 issue series. So what's going on is still the Punisher is working for the Hand, and the Punisher is trying to continue his mission. Got a little bit more muddled this time. There's a very lengthy but well illustrated flashback of the Punisher as a kid killing a guy. I mean, you presume he's killed because he's been burned alive. And first of all, I hard object, as I've said kind of in other videos, to this entire concept, because I don't like this idea that we're suddenly turning the Punisher into a child murderer and all the rest. I think this is ultimately harmful to the Punisher. I think it takes away from who he's been. I do not understand why they want to reveal that he had his ideas of justice as a child, and he went and killed some people. I just don't. I don't think that's helpful to the story of the Punisher, and I don't think it adds anything. I think it's subtractive. And I also think that if your goal was to say, hey, we want to start to distance the Punisher away from some of these school shootings and these horrific events that are happening, and people who put on the Punisher logo and then go off and do violence, featuring a child killing people, for good or for bad, is the opposite of whatever they're trying to do. It is the opposite of distancing yourself from that stuff. We had a horrific school shooting here in Texas this week, which, again, this video will be posted later, but everybody's still going to remember this because it was awful. And you're putting out a comic with a kid who is, going out and making like a homemade blowtorch to burn somebody alive. I don't know. I mean, I don't think that's going to, again, if your goal was to distance yourself from those kinds of events, you are failing miserably at that goal. The story itself is fine, although it started to take I don't know, on an aspect of where are they going here, because this issue was in many cases very similar to the last issue. The Punisher is gearing up to go to war against Ares. For some reason, the Punisher has determined that Ares is kind of the ultimate battle that he's got to go face. This is the villain this is where his mission is going, and he's willing to align with the Hand and the Beast to do that. He's trying to bring his children back to life now to get with his wife, but his wife is clearly suffering the classic, I'm a recently brought back to life zombie, and what happened, where are our kids? So anyway, so there's trouble in paradise, and you could tell where this is going. We've seen this plot before in a lot of cases, but we're setting up for a big battle between the Punisher and Ares. And, why is Ares now supplying a bunch of low-level thugs with guns? Okay. It doesn't, you do you, I guess. I don't know. But that's where the comic is at. It was, at the very least, there was more to read. So unlike the Avengers, which was read through in about 4 minutes, this comic took longer to get through. There's some stuff to digest and absorb. But the whole plot line of the Punisher is being manipulated by the Hand in return for his kids, and maybe the Punisher is playing them in returns, and once he gets his family, he'll kill off all the members of the Hand and everything else. There are a lot of scenes that just are making the Punisher very, very one note. And the shots of the little Hand priestess, going, kind of looking evil and cackling like, ah ha ha, you're succumbing to violence, ah ha ha, you beautiful violent monster, and all the rest. It's like, I mean, okay, I just you start to question where all this is going, and it does seem like it's spinning its wheels a little bit. And so, I've defended this title to some extent because I do think it's net harmful to the Punisher and that character. But at the very least, I kind of, I get where the story is at and where they're trying to go with it. It's just on issue 3, it shouldn't feel like it's killing for time, and it does feel like that a little bit. So we'll see. Anyway, I'll end it there. But lots more comics and things to talk about and think about. I hope you're having a great day. Let me know what comics you're reading and kind of some of your thoughts on it. And thanks for listening.